Hi, and welcome to this session where we want to talk about the role and destiny of the end-time church. It is important to know what God has in store for us, even as we see the unique dynamics of the end times from Isaiah 60, verse 1 to 2 unfolding. And we need to know the kind of people that God is looking for and the kind of church that He is returning for. And if we recall, in previous sessions, we mentioned that the church would actually be around during the Great Tribulation, and it is going to be the most glorious time for the church. In Song of Songs 6 verse 9, Jesus actually gives a prophetic declaration of the generation that would see His return, and it is pointing to only one generation that will live out the fullness of God. We need to realize that not even the New Testament church lived to the fullness of maturity. It actually says that the daughters saw her, meaning the end-time bride, and call her blessed. So we would be the finest generation that the world has ever seen. And if we recall also in Daniel 11 and 12, which is bookmarked by the abomination of desolation, yet in these two chapters, it also prophesies of the kind of people that will shine, that will prevail. In Daniel 11 verse 32 to 33, it says that the church, they would actually know their God and they would be strong, carry out great exploits, and instruct many. And in Daniel 12 verse 3, it also talks about those who will be wise and shine like the brightness of firmament, turning many to righteousness. So there really is no better time to live than now, and the church that would see the return of Jesus will actually step into the fullness that God has prepared for us even on this side of eternity. So there are three reasons why the church would be around during the time of greatest turmoil and opposition. The first is that God will not return until the church becomes blameless, spotless, and without blemish. This is Ephesians 5 verse 27, which talks about how Jesus would present to Himself that glorious bride without spot or wrinkle, holy and without blemish, because ultimately it's about being equally yoked with Jesus as our bridegroom. And this is linked to the second reason. The second reason is that the Great Tribulation will be a time of testing and refining where the church will become mature. Just as how gold is purified and proven when it is brought through the fire, the church will become mature and we will enter into the fullness of God's destiny through that very fire of refining through persecution and opposition. In Romans 5 verse 3 to 5, we know that through tribulations, it produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character. 1 Peter 4 verse 12 to 13 also tells us that when we go through that fiery trial, we are partaking of Christ's sufferings, and that is when His glory is revealed, because it's ultimately about being like Christ and shining forth His glory. And so through that fire of testing and trials is where our character, where our love is proven and made matured. And the third reason why we would be around is because the church has a role to partner with God. Ultimately, God created us for two main things. The first is intimacy, and the second, partnership. And we have to let this reality renew our minds and strike our hearts, because it is really a privilege that God would invite us to partner with Him, because it is definitely easier for Him to defeat Satan on His own, but yet He gives us such a glorious invitation for us to leave our fingerprints in the cement of His story, because He desires partnership. And so there is a crucial role that we play even at the end of the age. Many scriptures actually talk about the end-time bride, but we will just focus on primarily two passages today, from Ephesians 4 verse 13 and Revelation 22 verse 17. So we want to look at Ephesians 4 verse 13, which gives us a picture of the fullness of a victorious church. It basically tells us that we would be that church that will be perfect in unity with one another, in perfect intimacy with God, in perfect maturity in our character, and moving in the fullness of the Spirit's power. So Ephesians 4 verse 13 actually says, "Till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ." So till we all, it points to that corporate body, that individually and corporately we would come together and we would walk in the fullness and the reality of this verse. And it speaks about a community of people that will have the same expression as the New Testament church in our vision, in our values, lifestyle, perseverance, doctrine, and power. So there are actually four aspects in Ephesians 4 verse 13 for us to contend for. The first is the perfect unity as a body of Christ. there's going to come a time where the body of Christ would actually come together in a unity that is reflected from John 17 verse 23, the same oneness and unity that is within the triune God. And this will actually transcend unity in denominations, but there will be a unity in doctrine, and there will be especially a unity in prayer where we will be of one heart and one mind, even contending for the purposes of God. And we will also get to live out the fullness of John 13 verse 34 to 35, which is the new commandment that God gives to us, to love one another as He has loved us. And the second aspect of Ephesians 4 verse 13 is that we would actually walk in unprecedented intimacy with the bridegroom. We would come to that knowledge of the Son of God. And there is going to be one generation, that end-time bride, that will actually live out the fullness of the first and great commandment, where we love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And we would also deeply understand God. We will make our boast in that we understand that He is a God of loving kindness, and He exercises His righteousness and judgments on the earth. So basically, the church will enter into full maturity in our love and complete agreement with the heart of God and how He will execute even His righteousness. And the third aspect is that we would walk in maturity in character. And this is where we would live out the Sermon on the Mount lifestyle, which is God's benchmark as His kingdom people. And also in Galatians 5, we would carry the 8 fruits of the Spirit. We would be conformed to the image of Christ and have the necessary character traits even to carry His glory that He's going to release, whether it's humility, integrity, purity, and righteousness. We would come to that place where our character is being fully molded and fully established. So it's really going to be the glorious time for the Church of Jesus Christ. And the last aspect of the victorious church from Ephesians 4 verse 13 is that we will walk in the fullness of God's power. We will walk in the full stature of the measure of Christ. And this talks about a church that will move in great power and authority, and we will be a prophetic people. And what we read even in the book of Acts, we know about the Acts 2 outpouring. It was just a down payment of the fullness that God has for us. It was just a down payment of the Joel 2 outpouring that God is reserving even for the end of the age. And we will also walk in the reality of doing the greater works than Jesus did in John 14 verse 12. So God is raising up the Matthew 16 verse 18 church, who will be built on the rock of who He is, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail. We would see how God will bring this to pass as we position ourselves rightly and pray according to the blueprints that He's given to us in preparing ourselves as the end-time bride.